What if Tyler Bate turns heel on Pete Dunne? Well, if the inevitable roles are reversed, I believe this would lead to a classic match on the Raw Before Clash in Paris, which is set to be in Birmingham, with the big strong boy picking up the win. Where will both men go from here? Well, tell me. What if Stephanie Vaquin never relinquished her NXT Women's North American Championship? Well, if she walked into Stand and Deliver as a double champion, I believe she would have lost the title to none other than Cora Jade in the opener, although she would retain her Women's World title in the main event. But tell me, Drew McIntyre has just won the Money in the Bank briefcase, although later in the night, before he can officially cash in, CM Punk assaults him with the two brawling to the back, and on top of this, Rollins is distracted, which allows Damian Priest to nail Seth Evan chokeslam to pick up the win and retain the World Heavyweight Championship. But from here, this timeline follows the event of the real world, all up until the debut episode of Raw on Netflix, where Drew ends up managing to connect a Claymore to overcome main event Jey Uso. And after being able to defeat both Sami Zayn and Jimmy Uso, Drew consistently demands for a match with Roman Reigns, although it seemingly falls on deaf ears. So he decides to target the wise man, as he decimates Paul Heyman on the Raw before the Royal Rumble, yet the OTC doesn't show up for the save, which leaves Paul in a bloody mess in the ring. And because of this beatdown, Nick Aldis cancels the trade of SmackDown for Drew McIntyre, who is now forced to remain on Raw. Although at the Royal Rumble, rather than being eliminated by Damian Priest, he manages to counter and send the former El Campeon out of the match. But as he taunts at the former world champion, Roman Reigns comes out of nowhere and eliminates him. Drew is furious. He can't become a double champion at WrestleMania with assistance from his Money in the Bank briefcase. So after dropping Priest, he slides back into the ring and nails a Claymore onto the Tribal Chief before leaving the carcass behind. Although that's not what eliminates Reigns, as just like our timeline, he gets dumped out by CM Punk along with Seth Rollins, which leads to chaos erupting, with Reigns getting stomped onto the steel steps. And Drew, of course, loves this, as following his victory over Sami Zayn, he just laughs at the fallen Tribal Chief, along with the failures of CM Punk, which doesn't bring out Punk, but it does bring out a man who may hate the Straight Edge Saviour just as much as Drew does. Burn it down! Seth Rollins is here, and ahead of his Elimination Chamber qualifying match, Seth demands for Drew to leave Punk and Reigns to him, and for him to go after someone else, which the Scottish Warrior obviously refuses. And before he leaves, Drew attempts to Claymore Seth, but he counters as the two get into a brief scuffle, which briefly pauses when the man of the hour arrives. CM Punk is in the building, and because of Drew being distracted from a ghost of his past, Seth is able to nail a stomp on him before launching himself at the Straight Edge Saviour. It's utter madness on the road to the Elimination Chamber, and because of the three men's disdain for one another, to ensure the chamber is as fair as possible, Drew is forced to enter the chamber on the condition that if he wins, he must give up the Money in the Bank briefcase, which he very reasonably is not happy about. Nevertheless, at the show itself, all three of these men come into contact with one another. Although with Seth looking for a stomp, we see something akin to what Shawn Michaels did to The Undertaker in the 2010 Elimination Chamber match. Roman Reigns has just laid out his three most bitter rivals, and because of this, Logan Paul is able to scurry over and eliminate all three men. Everyone hates this, although there's still one more man Logan has yet to conquer. But regardless of that, Drew is furious that Roman Reigns has cost him two back-to-back chances at main eventing WrestleMania. Although on the other hand, he's somewhat thankful that he still has the Money in the Bank briefcase. Yet as he says this, he gets jumped by none other than Seth Rollins, who is also furious due to Drew going after CM Punk. And speaking of, soon after, the Straight Edge Saviour also involves himself in a wild brawl, which leaves only one man left to come out. And he does just that. Roman Reigns is here, and everyone is gunning to go after the Tribal Chief, but only one man can. As while CM Punk and Drew McIntyre do battle near the announcers table, Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns go at it up the ramp. Although all four men's paths converge, as in the end, Reigns is able to nail a spear onto CM Punk to stand tall. And with this, Adam Pearce officially sanctions the main event of WrestleMania 41 Night 1. CM Punk versus Drew McIntyre versus Seth Rollins versus Roman Reigns. It's arguably one of the most stacked WrestleMania main events of all time. But before the match, Drew makes a quick pit stop in the opening match of the card. Drew McIntyre is gonna cash in! He's going to ruin Jey Uso's WrestleMania moment just like his was last year! And although Jey gets a near fall with a spear, he can't compete with the far fresher Scottish Warrior. As with 2 Claymore kicks, Drew McIntyre wins. He is now the World Heavyweight Champion, but because of this, CM Punk decides to cash in his favour with Paul Heyman ahead of the Fatal 4-Way, which makes the match for the World Heavyweight Championship. Even if it wasn't planned, this is Punk's prime opportunity to win a world title, and on top of that, he wants to do it in the main event. But who will win? Can CM Punk cash in his favour successfully? Can Drew McIntyre retain? Can Seth Rollins become a 2-time World Heavyweight Champion? Or can Roman Reigns win his first title since the end of his historic WWE title run? Well, with Paul Heyman in the back watching on, the match is on. And as soon as the bell rings, Reigns almost instantaneously spears CM Punk, which sends him out the ring. And although Roman and Seth hate each other's guts, they know the threat Drew poses. So Roman sends Drew out the ring, who gets immediately dived onto by the Architect. And then it's time for some good old nostalgia, as Reigns and Rollins nail a triple powerbomb as if we're in 2012. But nothing lasts forever, as if Drew's back almost broken in half, Reigns manages to hit a spear out of nowhere. Although as he looks to finish the job on Rollins, he notices CM Punk get to his feet. So Reigns runs into the ring, and he looks for yet another spear, but Punk manages to counter before almost instantaneously locking in an anaconda vice, which doesn't last for too long, as Roman escapes the hold, then connects a Superman punch, and from here, he goes into the corner and lines Punk up for the 3rd spear of the match. Although the straight edge savior once again counters before looking for a GDS, yet this gets countered as well. Then the 2 warriors just begin to trade strikes, but Roman starts to get on top, so the best in the world has to rely on his wits to stay in the fight, and that aids him enough to where he stuns Roman with a big hit before being able to nail a GTS. Are we going to see a new world champion? Well, Drew McIntyre doesn't think so, as he manages to break up the pin, and this naturally makes Punk furious, as he starts swinging with reckless abandon on the Scottish Warrior, but Drew is too strong, as he completely bulldozes his way through Punk. Although in a genius move, the straight edge savior rolls to the outside, which gives him enough time to grab a chair and smash it into Drew's skull, as both men continue to brawl on the outside. And this is a similar story with Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns, as after dragging the Tribal Chief to the outside, Rollins hurls him into the ring post before stomping him over and over, although he wants to hit a curb stomp to keep Roman down, but he just can't hit it. Yet he is able to connect a pedigree onto the concrete floor, but Rollins wants more, so he starts to redecorate the announcers table, and after nailing a stomp on the Reigns, knocking him out cold, he drags the lifeless corpse and puts the OTC onto the table. And what Rollins does next is what makes him well known as the true best in the world. Roman Reigns is out, but just like when he got distracted, so does Rollins, as he goes over towards Drew and Punk. As with Drew hurling Punk into the ring, Seth comes out of nowhere, taking down the champ and planting him with a stomp. But the Architect wants to pin the quote-unquote best in the world, so he goes to the top rope. He wants a super stomp, yet he can't connect it, as Punk gets up too quick, so he's forced to just dive with no care for his own safety, which costs him the biggest match in his career, as Punk is able to counter and plant him with a GTS. And with that, Rollins goes to sleep. CM Punk is the new World Heavyweight Champion! He has proven why he earned the moniker as the best in the world. Drew's heart is crushed for the third WrestleMania in a row, and for a second time, he won the World Heavyweight Championship, only just to lose it in his first title defense. And CM Punk savours the moment as he rubs it in Drew's face as he walks to the back, which he also does for Roman Reigns. But as Reigns is about to reach the backstage area, he gets interrupted by someone incredibly disappointed in his own family.
If you smell what The Rock is cooking.
The Rock is here, and he's crashed the Night 1 WrestleMania main event. But why? Well, we find out when a certain wise man turns against his own tribal chief. What if Bayley dethrones Lyra Valkyria for the Women's Intercontinental Championship? Well, if this does happen, I believe Roxanne Perez will assault the new champ after a big win, which will lead to a match between the two at WrestleMania 41, with the Prodigy making the role model a transitional champion. But who would dethrone Roxy? Well, tell me. What if Rey Fenix had debuted on Raw? Well, if this did happen, I believe he would have reunited with Penta and gone to dethrone the War Raiders for the WWE Tag Team titles at WrestleMania 41. But who would dethrone them? Well, tell me. What if New Day had challenged the War Raiders for the WWE Tag Team titles at WrestleMania 41? Well, if this did happen, I believe they would cheat their way to victory to become the champs who run the camp. But who would dethrone them? Well, tell me. What if Roxanne Perez screws Bayley out of the Women's Intercontinental Championship? Well, if this does happen, I believe this would lead to the two squaring off at WrestleMania 41, while Liv Morgan goes after Lyra Valkyria. But who would win each match? Well, tell me. What if Sol Ruka qualifies for the NXT Women's North American Championship ladder match at Stand and Deliver? Well, if this does happen, I believe this will lead to her and Zarya inadvertently butting heads, although in the end, Sol would finally be able to unhook the title and win her first singles championship in WWE. But who would dethrone her? Well, tell me. What if Gunther retains his World Heavyweight Championship at WrestleMania 41? Well, if this does happen, I believe Gunther would go on to defeat the likes of Seth Rollins and CM Punk, although in the end, he will get screwed by Ilya Dragunov, which will lead to him dropping the title to none other than Braun Breaker. Where would things go from here? Well, tell me. We're at WrestleMania 41 and we kick off the first night in style with the World Heavyweight Championship match between main event Jey Uso and the reigning champ Gunther. And the match starts off hot as Jey instantly takes Gunther to the outside before connecting two humongous dives back to back. But before he can connect the third, the Ring General manages to floor the Yeet Man with a vicious lariat. Although Jey survives, which is something he has to do more and more throughout the contest, and he's succeeding at this. Yes, he isn't thriving, as he's still being dominated by the champion. But no matter what is thrown at him, Jey just won't budge. Gunther even manages to connect a powerbomb, although Jey, just like always, kicks out at 2. So the Ring General looks for another, yet Jey's able to counter before nailing him with a spear out of nowhere. But Gunther won't go down that easily, so Jey continues to fight as he nails whatever he can muster in a last-ditch effort to overthrow the King of the Ring winner. And this even includes a big-time splash, although Gunther kicks out again. So Jey looks for another, but Gunther attempts to block him with a suplex off the top rope, although Jey blocks his blockage by sending Gunther down and connecting one more splash. And with that, the biggest show of the year kicks off in a heartwarming manner. Jey Uso has gotten his WrestleMania moment. But up next, Charlotte Flair is looking to cause heartbreak by being the one to dethrone Tiffany Stratton. And she attempts to do this through targeting Tiffy's legs. It's a genius move by Charlotte, as with this, Tiffy can't hit any of her big moves without a mighty struggle. And this allows Charlotte to control the majority of the contest, with every hope spot being plunged in the darkness by the Queen. but as she looks for figure 8, Tiffany manages to counter, and with all the strength she can muster, Stratton plants her for an Alabama slam, yet the Queen kicks out. So Tiffy goes to the corner, but she hesitates to hit the prettiest moonsault ever because of her leg, and that slight distraction may cost Tiffy everything, as Charlotte manages to get out of harm's way before taking her down and locking in the figure 8. Tiffany is done, but she can't tap, yet Charlotte too refuses to give up as she lets go of the hold and subsequently locks her a natural selection, although Tiffy counters, and as one last ditch effort to take down the Queen, she nails a humongous springboard swanton bomb, and from here, Tiffy, with the willpower of a Green Lantern, descends into Charlotte with the prettiest moonsault ever. Tiffany has done it! She has toppled the final boss of the women's division, and with blood pouring down her skull, she marinates in it and celebrates her biggest win of her career. But what's next for the champ? Well, before we find out, it's time to find out who's the most badass member of the SmackDown roster, as it's time for Damian Priest to take on Drew McIntyre, and this very quickly devolves into a straight up fight, as both men just swing at each other with reckless abandon, and they end up hurling one another into anything and everything, the steel steps, the announcer's table, hell even the ring post. The match has effectively turned into both men's personal war zone, yet Drew is starting to overwhelm Damian, as he completely slaughters him in the corner, and from here, he signals for a Claymore, but Priest is able to counter. Then he looks for a self-affirming chokeslam, although Drew counters that. And with the former El Campeon dazed, Drew is able to nail a Future Shock DDT, yet Priest kicks out. So Drew goes into the corner, calls for Damian to get up, and he manages to connect a Claymore. But he wants more, so he nails another. And with a third Claymore, Drew McIntyre picks up the win. It wasn't pretty, but the Scottish Warrior got the job done. And this will more than likely be a similar case in the highly personal match between bitter rivals Jade Cargill and Naomi. And as soon as the bell rings, Naomi almost instantaneously rolls out of the ring, yet Cargill gives chase, and this ends horrifically for Naomi as she gets hurled into the barricade with enough brute force that will make 4 grin, and Cargill doesn't let up as she starts to redecorate the announcer's table, but this small distraction allows for Naomi to hurl herself at Cargill before nailing her with a huge suplex onto the concrete floor that rocks Jade to her core. And Naomi of course takes full advantage of this, yet she can't put Cargill away, so she looks for split-legged moonsault, although Cargill catches her and plants her into the center of the ring, and this seemingly turns the tide of the match completely in Cargill's favour as she starts pounding Naomi into the canvas. However, as she looks for a big running strike, Naomi dodges, which ends up with Cargill inadvertently clocking the referee, and this allows for Naomi to get a chair, yet before she can use the weapon, none other than Bianca Belair comes out of nowhere and takes the chair away from her. Bianca wants this to be a fair fight, although if Naomi distracted by this, Jade takes full advantage as she manages to plant Naomi with Jaded, and with the referee back up and Bianca unsure she made the right decision involving herself in this match, Jade Cargill picks up the win. She remains undefeated at WrestleMania just like Bianca Belair. Although once the dust settles, with Jade barely acknowledging Bianca, along with her distraught Naomi dragging her beaten body to the back, it's time for the humongous Women's Triple Threat WrestleMania match between Bianca Belair, Rhea Ripley, and the Women's World Champion Io Sky. And with the talent involved, there's no surprise that it's arguably the match of the night, or in fact, match of the year. All 3 women's chemistries with one another is off the charts, but no one seemingly has the advantage, and this continues with each pinfall attempt crawling closer and closer to a 3. Although in the dying stages of the contest, Io Sky just can't avoid the brutality any longer, as after missing a picture-perfect moonsault, she gets nailed by an avalanche riptide by Rhea Ripley. Yet before she can go into the cover, Bianca Belair comes out of nowhere and manages to plant Rhea with a KOD, and with that, Bianca Belair pins Mami to pick up the win and more importantly become the Women's World Champion. And on top of all that, her WrestleMania win streak lives, even though her path as champion is seemingly crystal clear. Although up next is a match that was changed last minute due to Kevin Owens' neck injury, as just like at WrestleMania 38 with Seth Rollins, the Viper is holding an open challenge. But who will answer the call? Well, after an eternal wait, we finally get our answer. The former Malachi, now Aleister Black, is back. This is going to be a tough hill for Randy to climb and overcome, and the match goes in a similar fashion to this, as Aleister decimates Randy with perfectly precise strikes, and even though he tries to connect an RKO, the key word is try, as he fails and gets taken down by more lethal strikes, yet Black can't keep Orton down, as he continues to stick in the match, even if he seemingly stands no chance, although all it takes is one lucky shot to turn the tide of battle, which occurs when Orton does, in fact, manage to connect the RKO, but that doesn't do it, so he decides to dish out something he was going to give to KO, as he goes into the corner and lines up the returning star for a punt, although Black is able to counter, and from here, he manages to nail a Black Mass. But he wants more, as he calls for the Viper to get up using his own foot, and with another Black Mass, Randy Orton is put down. It's one hell of a way to make a return. The statement has been made. And Rey Mysterio is looking to make a similar statement after the continuous disrespect El Grande Americano has shown Lucha Libre, and more in particular, what he's done to the LWO, although the man who comes out isn't quite who he expects. Chad Gable is here, and he's holding the mask of the persona of El Grande Americano. Believe it or not, Chad Gable was El Grande Americano all this time, but Ray just doesn't give a damn, as he launches himself at the leader of American Made before the match can even begin, and with this brings utter madness, as the LWO and the Creed brothers do battle on the ramp. Though the difference maker is Ivy Nile, as American Made are managing to overwhelm their opposition, yet that doesn't last long, as Zelina Vega comes out of nowhere to equal the odds, and with this, both teams end up rolling to the back aside from Rey Mysterio and Chad Gable. As thanks to the referee creating some much needed separation between the pair, the match can officially begin, and it's just as vicious as the brawling that preceded it, as both men fight all across ringside, although this turns technical rather quickly after Ray is caught and planted down with a vicious powerbomb. Gable is in control, but he can't maintain it for long as Ray begins to fight back. It's a heavily back and forth contest, and this culminates with a phenomenal closing sequence, which starts with Ray attempting a 619, but Gable is able to grab his legs, though Ray pushes back, yet as he goes after Chad, he gets launched into the air and planted with a beautiful German suplex, although Chad doesn't let go, as he perfectly transitions through before pushing Ray into the corner and connecting a Chaos Theory, and with that, Gable picks up the win. It may be the biggest win of his entire career. But now it's time for the Night 1 main event, as it's do or die for CM Punk, Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins as they battle it out in what turns out to be yet another phenomenal triple threat match. The hatred between all three men is on full display, but Punk starts to overwhelm his opposition, which forces the two former Shield members to team up temporarily to take out Punk, as they manage to nail a Shield powerbomb which almost breaks the announcer's table, but with it not being broken, this gives Seth Rollins an idea, as he hurls the OTC at the steps before redecorating the table, although he can't manage to put the Tribal Chief through it, as Roman fights back, then is able to plant Rollins through it. The Visionary is out, but Roman wants to ensure his victory, as he sends Punk into the ring before going into the corner. He wants one final spear, but then Paul Heyman trips him up. Was this a part of the favour, or did he do it out of his own free will? Well, before we find out, CM Punk is able to take full advantage of this, as he's able to nail GDS on Roman Reigns to pick up the win, as with this win, he gets everything he's ever wanted. He's made event at WrestleMania and won. He beat the Tribal Chief and the Revolutionary in one go, and he did it all alongside Paul Heyman. And this makes Roman and Seth irate, although as the OTC is on his way to the back, he gets interrupted by someone electrifying.
If you smell what
The Rock is here! But why? Well, we find out very quickly, as with the Tribal Chief staring a hole through the final boss, The Rock comes up to him and unbelievably nails a rock bottom onto Reigns. The message has been sent loud and clear, along with another. It's one hell of a way to close night 1 of WrestleMania 41. But the opening of Night 2 is pure unhinged chaos, as 5 teams compete in a massive World Tag Team Championship ladder match. Although with bodies being broken in half left, right and centre, the match eventually comes down to 2 teams during battle, as if Lost Garza, Motor City Machine Guns and the Street Profits down and out, all that remains is the former Tag Team Champions DIY and Pretty Deadly. It's a full circle moment, and even though they try their best, DIY failed to become 3-time World Tag Team Champions, as Johnny Gargano gets knocked off the ladder, with Ciampa similarly being disposed of. And with that, we have new champions. Pretty Deadly get their moment in the sun. They are finally at the top of the SmackDown Tag Team division. But what's next? Well, as order is being restored after the anarchy that was just caused, we see none other than Ludwig Kaiser. He's outright demanding for a match, and even though Adam Pearce is furious, he decides to give Kaiser his wish, only because his opponent is a just punishment in itself.
Rusev Udria, Rusev Machka.
Rusev is back, and today marks a very special day, as today is Rusev Day, and Ludwig surprisingly actually taunts at the former Miro, and this mistake costs him dearly, as he gets completely slaughtered by the returning star, and in the end, after a completely lopsided war, Rusev makes Ludwig Kaiser tap at the accolade. It's one hell of a way to make a return to WWE, but how the hell do we follow this? Well, it's time for a grudge match, as AJ Styles is looking to end the Maverick Logan Paul and ensure his twilight of his career isn't ruined by a celebrity. But can AJ Styles actually manage to overcome Logan Paul? Well, even though AJ is ready to fight, Logan clearly isn't, as he tries to run away and dodge the Phenomenal One, although this turns out to be his plan, as once he gets into the ring, he manages to take down Styles with a vicious boot. But even with that, Logan can't hold control over the match for too long, as Styles quickly fights back with a series of strikes, and to follow suit, he decks Paul with a Pele kick, which almost sends him to a different dimension. Although as Styles looks for a phenomenal forearm, Paul manages to move out of harm's way, as he then looks for one lucky punch, but Styles counters that, and with Paul stranded in the middle of the ring with the Phenomenal One, AJ decides to pull out one of his best shots, as he manages to connect the Styles clash. But to add insult to injury, Styles waits and waits until he finally connects a phenomenal forearm before going into the cover and picking up the win. Everyone is elated at this. No one wanted to see Logan Paul pick up the win, and on this night, he most certainly didn't. But can Zelina Vega repeat Pretty Deadly's feat early in the night and become a new champion? Well, to do that, she has to overcome the longest reigning and greatest Women's United States champion of all time, Chelsea Green. And thanks to Michin and B-Fab disposing of the secret Hervis of Alba Fire and Piper Niven, the match is a pure one-on-one affair. Yet the match is anything but pure, which doesn't make things much easier for Zelina Vega, as Chelsea is able to weasel away throughout the contest. And that is what allows Chelsea to wear down Zelina more and more. But she just can't seem to connect the unprettier, nor can she keep Zelina down for the free. And due to the fact that she isn't able to put the nail in the coffin of the match, her challenger starts to gain back control. And from here, it's elementary. As of a series of offense culminating in a code red, Zelina Vega is able to win her first singles title in WWE. It's yet another wholesome moment on the grandest stage. But who will hold the Intercontinental Championship by the end of the night? Will it be Braun Breaker? Will it be Penta? Will it be Dominic Mysterio? Or will it be Finn Balor? Well, the match is on, and of course, the Judgment Day work together, and due to their constant numbers advantage, they manage to control a majority of the contest. But the other members of the match don't take the beating lying down, as they give it the roll, which leads to Penta being able to take Dominic Mysterio out on the outside. But just as fast, after smashing Braun with a steel chair, Finn Balor nails a Bloody Sunday on the concrete floor on the man with zero fear. Penta is out, and it's Balor's opportunity to strike, as he nails a shotgun dropkick on a Braun Breaker before going to the top rope and nailing a coup de grace. Yet he can't capitalise, as Dominic Mysterio sends Balor to the outside before stealing the pin and the win. Balor is furious, although as he's bringing the new champ, we see Dom Dom finally turn on the Prince as he nails a nutshot onto Balor before celebrating his victory with his fellow Judgment Day members. The Prince has been exiled. But can Lyra Valkyria and Bayley exile a Judgment Day, and more in particular, dethrone Women's Tag Team Champions Liv Morgan and Michaela Rodriguez? Well, even though the babyfaces are determined, the heels' experience together as a tag team is what overwhelms them throughout. But that determination pushes the Women's Intercontinental Champion and the role model to fight back, as it's even looking like they could topple the Judgment Day. Yet as this looks possible, with Raquel Rodriguez distracting the referee, Roxanne Perez decides to reignite her hatred for Bayley as she goes after the role model once again as she nails a Pop Rocks onto the concrete floor. The role model is out, and due to the numbers game heavily against the Bird Lady, even though she tries her best, it's just not enough to dethrone the Judgment Day, as in the end, Liv Morgan manages to plant an Oblivion to pick up the win and retain for her team. But they aren't satisfied with just the win, as Liv and Raquel continue beating down the Women's Intercontinental Champion. She needs help, and help does indeed arrive. Becky Lynch is back in WWE, and she's here to handle business as she goes straight after Raquel Rodriguez, and more particularly Liv Morgan, as she manages to run both of them off. Then we see a hell of a tantalizing confrontation between the Bird Lady and the Irish Lass Kicker, although Big Time Bex decides to break the ice as she unbelievably nails a manhandle slam on the Women's Intercontinental Champion. She's seemingly coming after all the gold, aside from the United States Championship, as that is left to Jacob Fatu to attempt to overthrow, dethrone and conquer LA Knight. But defeating the megastar is no easy task. He didn't become a two-time United States champion for nothing. Though this is Jacob Fatu, he's an entirely different beast. He's an entirely different animal to anyone else in the company. And this is evident when Knight manages to connect the BFT for only a 1 count. The champ is shook, yet he knows he needs more to keep Fatu down. So he looks for another blunt force trauma, although Jacob catches him, spins him around, then plants him down with a vicious DDT. But Knight too won't stay down without a fight, although he's getting completely overwhelmed by the bigger and stronger challenger, and he just can't handle it, as in the end, he gets nailed by not one, but 2 humongous moonsaults, which keep him down for the free. We have a new champion! Jacob Fatu has captured his first title in WWE, and Tama Tonga is congratulating him on the ramp, while Solo Sikoa is nowhere to be seen. Although before we get to the finale of WrestleMania 41, it's time to see who will walk out of Vegas as WWE Tag Team Champions. Will it be the New Day, or will it be the War Raiders? Well, with both teams' undeniable chemistry, the match is even throughout. When New Day has the speed, War Raiders bring the strength. When New Day bring the agility, War Raiders bring their own, and then some. They're so evenly matched, but what turns out to be the key difference maker is mentality. As with the War Raiders' professionalism, comes the New Day's Weasley strategies, which includes cheating. As with Xavier Woods distracting the referee just like the previous match, Kofi Kingston grabs a chair and smashes it into both Eric and Ivar. It's a disgraceful act by the once pure New Day, and with both members of the former Viking experience laid out, the New Day pick up the pieces. As with the Midnight Hour, we see new tag team champions. For the 13th time, New Day hold tag gold. But now, it's time for the main event of the evening, as it's time for a god to take on a titan. It's time for the future to take on the past. It's time for Cody Rhodes to take on John Cena. But before the match can even begin, we see another appearance from the final boss as he comes out to stand by the side of John Cena. The odds are well and truly stacked against Cody Rhodes, but just like John Cena once did, he never gives up as he fights through whatever this new corporation has in store for him, although the numbers game starts to take its toll on the American Nightmare, which includes when Solo Sikoa comes out of nowhere and spikes Cody Rhodes. He still isn't done with the champ after all this time, and just like at WrestleMania 40, The Rock forces the referee to not call for a DQ. Although before Solo can do any more damage, Jacob Fatu comes out to start to argue with his Timu tribal chief. Friction is growing, the new bloodline is seemingly on the way out, until Solo decides to put a nail in the coffin with another Samoan spike. But that doesn't keep Jacob Fatu down, so the final boss gets involved even more, as he then nails a rock bottom on the United States champion, with him then heading into the ring. And with this alongside the final boss's political power, Cena is able to grab a chair and beat it into Rhodes over and over and over again with no DQ in sight. It's looking hopeless for the champ, but before The Rock can lay a hand on the American Nightmare, Roman Reigns comes out to attempt to even the odds. Although as he looks to even enter the ring and potentially go after The Rock, he gets stopped by something or someone rather all too familiar. Seth Rollins has aligned with the final boss, and he signifies his turn by nailing a stomp onto his former ally. And now Cody is all alone, almost knocked out once again. Although The Rock, Cena and Rollins get interrupted by someone the final boss has a lot of history with. Stone Cold is here, and he's got stunners for everyone. As if him raising hell and leaving, the match resumes to a fair one-on-one contest. Or so you think, as Cena disgustingly nails a low blow at Illyria American Nightmare, with the referee still afraid to call for the DQ. And this act of desperation is what ultimately allows for him to nail an AA on the Rhodes. But that doesn't do the trick. Cena is horrified, although his veteran instinct kicks in, as he immediately follows up the near fall with an STFU. Cody has nowhere to go, but he refuses to tap. He won't give up on his dream, yet his fever dream turns into a nightmare. As with the submission getting tighter and tighter, Cody Rhodes passes out. John Cena has won number 17. He is now the kingpin of WWE. Who the hell can stop him? Well, we're just gonna have to wait and see. What if Penta wins his first singles championship in WWE at WrestleMania 41? Well, if this does happen, I believe Penta would hold the title until Money in the Bank, where he'll be dethroned by none other than Ludwig Kaiser, which would set the stage for Sheamus to finally finish his story and become Grand Slam champion at SummerSlam. But tell me, what if Finn Balor becomes Intercontinental Champion at WrestleMania 41? Well, if this does happen, I believe the Prince will be a fighting champion, as he'd have regular bangers against the likes of Penta and Sheamus, although he'd eventually be betrayed by Judgment Day and lose to Dominic Mysterio at the July edition of Saturday Night's main event. But who would dethrone Dom Dom? Well, tell me. What if Dominic Mysterio dethrones Braun Breaker for the Intercontinental Championship at WrestleMania 41? Well, if this does happen, I believe he would betray Balor after the win, which would eventually lead to the two squaring off at King and Queen of the Ring, with the Prince picking up the win and the title. But who would dethrone him? Well, tell me. What if Braun Breaker retains the Intercontinental Championship at WrestleMania 41? Well, if this does happen, I believe Braun will continue to dominate the mid-card division up until Night of Champions, where Sheamus would finally become Grand Slam champion. But who would dethrone the Celtic Warrior? Well, tell me. Is this how WWE should have booked the number one contenders women's tag team title gauntlet match for WrestleMania 41? As in my opinion, I believe the match should have started with Lyra Valkyria and Bayley alongside Maxine Dupree and Natalya, with the role model instantly betraying the Bird Lady, which would allow for Natalya to lock on a sharpshooter to make Lyra pass out. Then the duo would manage to overcome PFC in a highly competitive back and forth, although they would then have to turn their attention to the Secret Service. However, due to Zelina Vega attacking Chelsea Green, this allows for Maxine to roll up Piper Niven for the upset elimination. But their luck would run out almost instantly after this, as they would succumb to Mishin and B-Fab before they would go up against KC2. And after a lengthy final stretch, Katana Chance would manage to pin B-Fab to pick up the win for her team. Or so you think, as Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross would insert themselves into the match at the last second to dismantle KC2 to pick up the win and punch their ticket to WrestleMania 41. And on top of this, Bayley vs Lyra 3 would also be set for the grandest stage of them all in the process of this match. But do you agree with this booking? Well, tell me. At WrestleMania 41, there were a whole host of matches that could have taken place, but there are 3 in particular that I scripted and recorded, only for it to be deleted before the final product released. So in today's video, I'm going to be showing you all 3 of these matches in chronological order of which they would be on the card. Therefore, we start off with Bayley vs Roxanne Perez, which is believed to be set in stone, with their feud escalating only until the Elimination Chamber. Then this rivalry seemingly was forgotten about. But how would this match have played out? Well, following Ludwig Kaiser's failed open challenge is the highly intense matchup, and as the description suggests, the contest is vicious. It's everything you'd expect from the pair, if not more, but only one can stand tall, and it's looking like it could be the role model who does so, as she's managing to get in all of her signature offense, although all it takes is one moment to change the course of history, which occurs when the Prodigy is able to counter Bayley as she connects a middle rope pop rocks before instantaneously transitioning spinning into the crossface, and unbelievably, Bayley taps out. That in itself is one hell of a feat, not even including the Royal Rumble and Elimination Chamber performances. The Prodigy's future is bright. But that isn't the only match involving Bayley that was made, as after the match with Roxy was seemingly no longer on the table, I decided to film a triple threat involving Bayley, Liv Morgan and Lyra Valkyria for the Women's Intercontinental Championship, which also isn't going to occur, at least at the time of filming. But regardless, who will win? Well, the match is on, and naturally, the role model and the champ team up on one half of the Women's Tag Team Champions. Although this doesn't last forever, as Bayley attempts to sneakily roll up Lyra, but she kicks out. It's every woman for themselves, and from here the match rages on, with counter after counter, and big move after big move taking place, with no one seemingly having the advantage. Something's gotta give, and this seems to come in the form of Raquel Rodriguez, as she manages to neutralize Bayley before being taken out by the champ. Although this distraction is all Liv needed, as she's able to nail an oblivion onto Lyra Valkyria. But before she can go into the cover, Becky Lynch comes out of nowhere to even the score with the Queen of the Revenge Tour. And thanks to this, Lyra is able to take full advantage, as with a Nightwing, the Bird Lady retains. Lyra Valkyria is still a Women's Intercontinental Champion, although at the end of the day, it's all thanks to Big Time Bex. Yet Lyra doesn't care, she serenades in a victory. All the while, Becky Lynch watches on. But now it's time for the final scrap match of the video, as originally, Randy Orton was scheduled to take on Kevin Owens at WrestleMania 41, however due to KO needing neck surgery, this match was cancelled. But what could the match have looked like had Owens never got injured? Well, before the main event of WrestleMania Saturday, we find out as it's time for the heated clash of stars. And the match starts off with finishes being counted back and forth, but Owens manages to get the upper hand with a well-timed kick, as he then sends Orton out of the ring before nailing a humongous dive onto him. Then he tries to go for the kill, but Orton manages to escape the attempted Ape powerbomb before sending him to the barricade and subsequently the ring. But KO won't stop fighting, as he gets back into the match with a knee and a super kick. Yet he can't hold control for long, as both men are showing to be each other's equals more and more, with counter on top of counter being traded. Though Randy just can't quite manage to hit the RKO. That is until Owens goes for a big moonsault, which ends in catastrophe for the once prized fighter. But Orton made a promise. He goes into the corner, lines him up and connects arguably the most dangerous move in WWE, the Pun Kick. And with that, Randy Orton wins. He stands tall over Kevin Owens, and he's managed to put the nail in the coffin of this feud. Where will both men go from here? Well, that's for you to decide. What if Omos returns in the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal? Well, if this does happen, even though he'd lose and more likely disappear again, I believe he should continue his stay on SmackDown and go after the new United States Champion Jacob Fatu, which will lead to a match between the two Titans at Backlash, with Fatu ultimately retaining. But what would Omos do after this? Well, tell me. What if Jeff Cobb joins WWE and goes straight to the main roster? Well, if this does happen, I believe he will go to Raw and tear his way through the roster, which will lead to a big meaty feud with Bronson Reed. Although eventually, both men would end up respecting each other to the point where they would set up an alliance with them capturing tag team gold shortly after this. But who would dethrone them? Well, tell me. Who should win the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal? Well, in my opinion, I believe the final two should come down to Rey Fenix and Karrion Kross, with Fenix picking up the big win. But who do you think should win? Well, tell me. What if Mariah May goes to NXT? Well, if this does happen, I believe she should instantly target the NXT Women's Champion Stephanie Vaquer, which will lead to May subsequently dethroning La Primera. But who would dethrone her? Well, tell me. What if Bushi signs with WWE? Well, if this does happen, I believe he will go to NXT and immediately target the NXT North American Champion Ricky Saints, which would subsequently lead to a title match. But who would win? Well, tell me. What if Rusev returns at WrestleMania 41? Well, if this does happen, I believe he'll face Randy Orton, with him assisting the trend of the Vipers PLE losing streak. What would he do after this? Well, tell me. We're at NXT Stand and Deliver, and we kick off the show with a countdown, and more in particular, it's time for the humongous Fatal 4-Way Elimination Tag Team match, with the winners challenging Lyra Valkyria and Bayley, or Liv Morgan and Raquel Rodriguez for the Women's Tag Team titles on the NXT after WrestleMania 41. and the match is full-blown mayhem. There's wrestlers going at it all over the arena. You have Cora Jade and Jakara Jackson doing battle on the ramp. You have Roxanne Perez and Lash in trading modes on the stage. And with the endless carnage, leaves JC Jane and Gigi Dolan brawling at ringside, with Tatum Paxley and Fallon Henley doing their best to eliminate the other in the ring. Although a well-timed assist from Gigi, Tatum nails a Psycho Trap to shockingly eliminate Fatal Influence first. And they are not happy about it, as they beat down Chemical X following their loss. Full Metaphor and Roxanne Perez alongside Cora Jade can't take advantage, as they're so focused on one another that Tatum Gigi gets some much needed rest, even if it's temporary. And indeed it is, as with Lash Legends being disposed of, Roxy is able to nail a prop box to eliminate Metaphor. We're down to 2 teams, yet a difference maker arrives in the form of Shotzi. We haven't seen her in months, and she shows why she has the nickname Blackheart. Shotzi has betrayed her Chemical X teammates, but why? Well, no one knows. But what everyone does know is that Roxanne Perez takes advantage of the situation, and with a crossface applied, Tatum Paxley passes out. The Frenemies have won. They have their shot at winning main roster gold. Yet to do that, they have to get through what could be the champions. But after one shock could enter another, as up next is the 6-woman ladder match to crown the new NXT Women's North American Champion after Stephanie Vaquer relinquished the title. And of course, just like the previous match, this one is utter madness. Each woman are beyond desperate to become a champion, yet only one can do it. So who the hell will it be? Well, one thing's for certain, it won't be Izzy Dame, as she gets completely and utterly brutalized by every single woman in the match. And what keeps her out of the rest of the match is a thunderous dive through a ladder courtesy of Kalani Jordan. But very quickly, the numbers dwindle further, as 5 standing women turn to 4, as Lola Vice gets nailed by a humongous F5 onto a ladder by Zarya. She's done, and as soon as this happens, Sol Ruka is able to nail a picture-perfect Soul Snatcher onto Kalani Jordan on top of a ladder as well. And now we're down to 3 women who are now cold. Who can win? Can Zarya win her first championship in WWE? Can Sol Ruka avenge her loss in the inaugural Women's North American Championship ladder match? Or can Thea Hale complete her comeback tour in style? Well, of course, the tag team up on the Lone Wolf, as they manage to send Thea out on the ring before they both begin to climb the ladder. And neither of them are budging. They both want the title, although because of their stubbornness, neither of them get it, as Thea Hale manages to get back into the fight and knock the ladder over, which sends Sol and Zarya crashing and burning. And now she's the only one left. The crowd are on their feet. Thea is as energized as ever, and with her setting up the ladder and climbing to her destiny, Thea Hale unhooks the NXT Women's North American Championship. It's arguably the biggest win of her career. She is now champion, and someone who she's quite fond of watches on from a distance. Nevertheless, the wholesome moments have ended, as now it's time for war. It's time for bloodshed. It's time for the D'Angelo family to take on Dark State. And whilst war has casualties, you wouldn't expect it from your own family, as before the match can even begin, Channing Stacks Lorenzo completely decimates Tony D'Angelo with a vicious low blow before going after Luca Crucifino. It's an unbelievable and downright disgusting betrayal, and whilst he has the opportunity to go after Dark State, he chooses not to, as he leaves his former family behind, and Dark State just merely pick up the pieces, as if the hounds just preying on the weak, as in the end, after a completely lopsided affair, Dark State put the D'Angelo family down. And it's no surprise after what just happened, there's so many questions unanswered. But up next, can Ethan Page make Ricky Saints a transitional champion? Well, he's doing his damned best to do so, as he completely lays into him in the corner, but Ricky won't take the beating lying down, as both men go back and forth throughout the contest. Yet Ethan is so desperate to call himself NXT North American Champion that after taking down Ricky, he goes to the outside and brings in a steel chair into the match. Although this completely backfires on him, as when he goes into the ring, he gets wiped out by a humongous spear, and after following this up with a Dominator, we hear the phrase, "and still." Ricky Saints has retained! The revolution is now! And no one can seemingly stop Ricky's ascension to godhood! Yet speaking of godhood, many consider Fraxium to be the greatest tag team currently active in the wrestling world, and they're looking to prove that yet again by defeating none other than Hank and Tank, who just barely by the skin of their teeth got into a match. But can they pull off yet another miracle and win Tag Team Gold? Well, whilst they have the strength advantage, that means next to nothing to Fraxium, whose speed seemingly rivals Sonic. But that speed can have consequences, which we see when Axiom inadvertently knocks Nathan Frazier off the apron, and Tank takes advantage as he almost manages to roll up Axiom for the free. Yet that doesn't happen, as Axiom escapes before nailing a golden ratio on a Tank. But what he doesn't realise is that Hank is a legal participant, as he manages to roll up Axiom just like his tag team partner did, which this time keeps him down for the free. It's arguably the upset of the century. The Golden Children of Tag Team Wrestling have been beaten by a comedy duo, and it's all because of one accidental miscommunication. It's happened before, but will it happen again? Well, before we find out, it's time to see who will leave Vegas as NXT Women's Champion. But who will it be? Will it be Jada Parker? Will it be Jordynne Grace? Will it be Julia? Or will it be the champ Stephanie Vaquer? Well, the match is on, and it's a tense affair. It's as if four tireless titans are doing battle, yet no matter how much stamina each participant has, they can only tolerate so much damage. And this is perfectly personified when the champion is taken out of the match by being put through the announcer's table with a beautiful moonsault courtesy of Julia. Yet she isn't done there, as she grabs a chair before nailing it over and over and over again into Jordynne Grace. This new attitude from the Beautiful Madness is clearly working for her, as now all that's standing between her and victory is Jada Parker. And while she tries her best, Jada just can't quite manage to handle this new ruthless side of the former NXT Women's Champion. As with a glorious driver on a well-placed chair, along with a picture-perfect Kamigoye knee strike, Julia reclaims her prize. She is now a two-time NXT Women's Champion, but to climb the mountain, is it worth being all alone at the top? Well, before we find out, as Trick Williams is heading out for his NXT Championship main event, he gets stopped by someone he knows all too well. Trick, I know everything, and I'm so disappointed in you, because if you go through your plan with them, quite frankly, you'll be no better than Carmelo Hayes. So, please, be the man who won the NXT title twice as the underdog. Be the man who beat Carmelo Hayes in the main event of last year's Stand and Deliver. Be the man who beat me. Please, Trick. It's a hell of an ominous plea by the still injured Ilya Dragunov. But will them words of wisdom fall on deaf ears, as it's now time for the NXT Championship main event between Trick Williams, Javon Evans and the ruler Obafemi. And Javon is looking to prove himself straight away as he bounces all over the place, and this culminates with him nailing a humongous dive onto Trick Williams. But as he looks for one on Obafemi, the Conqueror unbelievably manages to catch Javon before planting him back first onto the announcer's table. His back must be broken in half, yet Oba doesn't care as he looks for a powerbomb onto the hardest spot in the ring, although Javon gets out of it. But before he can do anything else, Trick hurls Javon into the barricade while sending Oba into the steel steps. And this stuns the big man, as Trick is able to get the ruler back into the ring as he attempts to finish the match with a trick shot of all the champ counters. Then it's Oba who looks for his finishing blow, but Trick is similarly able to counter that. And even though he can barely stand, Javon attempts to reinsert himself into the match, whilst the two titans slug it out of one another. And with this attempt, he manages to nail a picture-perfect cutter, which wipes out Trick Williams. But that was all the gas he had left in the tank, as he quickly gets taken down by Obafemi, who then powerbombs the young OG to the outside. Javon is done, and so is Trick, as he gets nailed by a powerbomb. Although as the referee's count gets to a 2, that's when Dark State interferes, as they completely wipe out over Femi. All the while, they throw Javon's near lifeless corpse back into the ring, but he starts to stir, and he watches on in horror at the destruction this new faction have caused onto the ruler. Although his thoughts get cut off with a gnarly nut shot delivered by none other than Trick Williams. No one can believe it, and as soon as this happens, Dark State just leaves the near lifeless champion behind, whilst Trick nails a trick shot on Young OG to pick up the win at his 3rd NXT title. Who the hell can stop Trick? Who the hell can stop Dark State? Are they working together? Have we all just been fooled? Well, we're just gonna have to wait and see. As if you like this video, I think this might interest you. What if Chelsea Green holds an open challenge at WrestleMania 41? Well, if this does happen, I believe Nikki Bella would answer the call, and thanks to some assistance from Zelina Vega, we would see a new champion. But who would dethrone Nikki? Well, tell me. Who will answer Randy Orton's open challenge? Well, with Aleister Black returning on the SmackDown after WrestleMania 41, I believe this is the perfect chance to return Rusev, with Orton's PLE losing streak continuing. But who do you think should answer the call? Well, tell me. Who should dethrone Jey Uso? Well, in my opinion, I believe Braun Breaker should end up spearing Jey to Kingdom Come at Money in the Bank, with him winning via referee stoppage. But who would best Braun? Well, tell me. What if Chemical X dethrone Becky Lynch and Lyra Valkyria for the Women's Tag Team Championships? Well, if this does happen, I believe it will be because of Becky betraying Lyra, leading to their singles feud. But who would dethrone the new champions? Well, tell me. What if Aleister Black returns on the SmackDown after WrestleMania 41? Well, if this does happen, I believe he would instantly target Cody Rhodes, which will lead to a match at Backlash between the two, with Black ultimately standing tall. But where would he go from here? Well, tell me. What if Lola Vice gets called up to the main roster? Well, if this does happen, I believe she'll go to SmackDown and target the new Women's United States Champion Zelina Vega, which will lead to a match between the pair on the SmackDown before Night of Champions. But who would win? And what would Lola do after this? Well, tell me. What if Carmelo Hayes gets a WWE title opportunity? Well, if this does happen after he won the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal, I believe he would fail to beat John Cena in the main event for SmackDown, although he'd be able to capture the United States Championship shortly after this. But who to throw Melo? Well, tell me. It's time for the main event of Backlash, which involves the hometown boy himself. Randy Orton is here, and he's looking for lucky number 15. Although to do that, he has to overcome his long-lost rival John Cena. But things are different this time. The roles are reversed. Orton is being cheered, and Cena is being booed. Yet like the man said, he just doesn't give a damn. So the match is on, and he immediately attempts an AA, though Orton manages to escape with a few well-timed elbows to the side of the temple, before he too attempts his finishing blow, although this gets countered as well. Then both warriors stand off with one another. They know each other inside and out, and both men decide to break the ice through some chain wrestling, as they lock up, although Cena is able to push Orton into the corner before nailing a punch. But he makes the mistake of going for another, as Orton is able to counter before locking up with him yet again, although yet again, Cena nails a cheap shot onto the Viper. And he makes the same mistake once more, as Orton counters and drives him down with a huge uppercut. Cena is rocked, although Orton backs off to allow the champ some breathing room. Even after all this time, there's still a sliver of respect left from the challenger. So for a third time, these two titans lock up, and this time, both men trade holds. Though this time, Orton gets his receipt before the hold is broken. But as soon as this happens, Orton once again looks for an RKO, although Cena is able to get out of dodge. And from here, Cena just cowers on the outside. That is until the referee forces the Apex Predator to get back, which gives Cena the primetime opening, and he puts it to good use, as he takes down Orton with a dropkick. Yet John can't hold control for long, as Randy pushes back, though he too can't hold control, as Cena is able to plant him straight back down. and Cena just continues to batter down Orton with relentless punches and kicks. Then Big Match John looks for the AA once again, but the triple elbows to the side of the skull gives Orton a chance. Yet this is snuffed out with a well-timed counter by Cena, who then goes back to the classics early on, as he hits a shoulder tackle, then another, and then he hits the third move of Doom, but the fourth is nowhere to be found, as Orton counters with a well-timed kick before sending the champ to the outside. Although the Viper naturally gives chase, as he floors him with an apron clothesline, and of course, Randy isn't done, as he then hurls Cena into the barricade before dropping an elbow onto his back. Although with a knee, Cena fights back as he then launches Orton into the steel steps. Then he unbelievably attempts a count-out win, but Orton just in the nick of time breaks up the count, which annoys Cena as he takes the Viper down with a monkey flip before he too drops an elbow, and he keeps up with the methodical offense as he takes him down with a strike before delivering a back curling kick. Then he proceeds to rain down punches as if a storm was coming, and after all that, he just stomps on him once again. It's all Cena at the moment. And that continues as he nails a beautiful gut-wrench suplex which earns him a near fall. So he then attempts a powerbomb, although Orton manages to counter. Yet as he looks for a knee, Cena is able to move and plow through the challenger with all of his weight. Though that again only gets him a near fall. Cena is growing frustrated, although after nailing another big power move, he gets an idea. As he climbs to the top rope, calls for Orton to get up, but he can't connect his dive, as the Viper manages to catch him and plant him down with a powerbomb. And once Orton picks up the lifeless corpse, it's time for vintage Orton offense, as he nails a clothesline, then another clothesline, and with a scoop slam, everyone knows what's next, as Orton plays to the crowd, then nails a spike DDT, and he then calls for Cena to get up. He wants the RKO, but he just can't seem to connect it, as Cena once again blocks it, as he then manages to nail the AA. Is Randy Orton done? Well, no. He survives, and Cena is irate. He thought he had the match won, so he looks for another, but Orton manages to connect the RKO mid-AA. Cena is out. Orton goes into the cover, and the referee only can count to a 2. Everyone thought the match was over, including the Viper, who starts to listen to the voices. As he goes into the corner, he's gonna punt Cena, although before he does, we hear some familiar music. Travis Scott is here to ruin another main event match, but this time, Orton brought back up as Cody Rhodes comes out of nowhere to nail a crossroads onto the celebrity before dragging him away. And with that, the match resumes as a one-on-one contest, as Orton looks for a punt kick, although Cena manages to move, and that slight distraction from Travis proves to be the ultimate difference maker, as Cena is able to nail another AA. But he wants to put an exclamation point onto the match, as he locks in an STFU onto the Viper. He has nowhere to go, and even though he tries his best, he just can't quite manage to escape the hold, but he won't give up. So Cena forces him to, as he lets go of the hold, and with the strength of a god, he immediately transitions into another AA. John Cena has won. He has retained the WWE Championship, and it was all thanks to that weasel Travis Scott. Something's gotta give, but not on this night, as the show closes with Big Match John winning another big match. And if you like this story, I think this might interest you. What if Tama Tonga never got injured? Well, firstly, get better soon, Tama, and secondly, I believe you continue assisting Jacob Fatu and Solo Sikoa against their enemies until Tonga Loa's return, with them capturing tag team gold shortly after this. But who would dethrone them? Well, tell me. What if Bayley turns heel? Well, if this does happen, I believe she would attack Lyra Valkyria and form an alliance with Becky Lynch, which would culminate in a triple threat match at SummerSlam with the Bird Lady ultimately standing tall. But tell me, what if Randy Orton dethrones John Cena for the WWE title at Backlash? Well, if this does happen, I believe it will lead to him facing off against Cody Rhodes at SummerSlam, with the American Nightmare reclaiming his prize. But would this lead to a Randy Orton heel turn? Well, tell me. What if Zaruka dethroned the Judgment Day for the Women's Tag Team Championships? Well, if this does happen, I believe they'll be fighting champions as they would topple the likes of Chemical X and Meta-4, although they'd eventually lose to none other than the returning Kabuki Warriors. But who dethroned them? Well, tell me. What if Bianca Belair never got injured? Well, firstly, get better soon, Bianca. And secondly, I believe she would have continued her program with Naomi and Jade Cargill, culminating in a triple threat match at SummerSlam with Naomi ultimately standing tall. But tell me, who should dethrone Zelina Vega? Well, in my opinion, although Mission is a good choice, I believe a returning Alexa Bliss should be the one to ultimately topple Zelina. But who would dethrone her? Well, tell me. What if Tekla sides with WWE? Well, if this does happen, I believe she would go to NXT and instantly set her sights on Sol Ruka's North American title, which will lead to Zarya turning on her partner during the title match, with Tekla capturing her first NXT championship in the process of this. But who would dethrone her? Well, tell me. What if Roxanne Perez defeats Rhea Ripley on Raw? Well, if this does happen, I believe this will lead to Roxy taking on Io Sky for the Women's World title at Backlash, with Sky ultimately standing tall. But tell me, what if Mayu Iwatani signs with WWE? Well, if this does happen, I believe she would screw Io Sky on the Women's World Championship, setting up their rivalry, which would involve a Damage Control Civil War. But who would each member of the faction side with? Well, tell me. What if Julia gets permanently called up to Raw? Well, if this does happen, I believe her feud with Rhea Ripley would only intensify, with a match between the two taking place at Evolution. But who would win? Well, tell me. What if Becky Lynch never turned heel? Well, after losing the women's tag team titles, I believe she and Lyra Valkyria would have a friendly match at Backlash, which would be ruined by a returning Bayley, who would attack both women, subsequently turning heel.